If you ever find yourself sitting in an emergency room, and hopefully you don't, but if you do, there's this intense underlying comfort in the absolute precision of it all.
Oh, absolutely. It's not a fun place to be, but the system is incredibly clear.
Yeah, exactly. Like you walk in, you've taken a bad fall, your arm is just throbbing. They take you back, they put you in front of that massive machine, and literally 5 minutes later, there's an illuminated photograph of the problem.
Just a crisp black and white x-ray on the board.
Right. The doctor clips it up there, points a pin at this very obvious, jagged little white line, and just says, there it is. That's the fracture.
It is entirely binary. I mean, the bone is either broken or it isn't. It's in place or it's misaligned.
Exactly. It's clean. The problem is completely isolated. You aren't sitting there wondering if your broken arm is somehow deeply connected to the geopolitical state of the world.
Right. You're not agonizing over the ethics of getting a cast.
No. You don't have to wonder if fixing the arm is morally justifiable. You just cast it up and you let it heal. But here's the thing. The moment you step out of that sterile hospital environment and try to make a practical or, a moral decision in your actual everyday life,
the x-ray machine shatters.
it is completely shattered. We are operating in a diagnostic landscape right now that is just beyond murky.
Oh, it's incredibly dense.
If you are a person who cares, like if you're listening to this deep dive right now on your commute or, while you're folding laundry, you know this feeling. It's this overwhelming, crushing sensation that absolutely everything you interact with is a screaming 5-alarm emergency.
It's the psychological equivalent of trying to drink from 50 fire hoses at once.
Yes.
The human brain simply did not evolve to process the sheer volume of crisis we are exposed to on a daily basis. I mean, you wake up, you roll over, you grab your phone, and the hierarchy of panic is just completely flat.
I do this every single morning, and it is terrifying. Because you look at your screen, and right there on your lock screen, you have a breaking news alert about some catastrophic climate milestone.
Right, a literal existential threat.
Yeah, sitting right next to a notification that your work inbox has 40 unread emails from a passive-aggressive client.
Which feels just as urgent in the moment.
Exactly, and that is nestled directly beneath an article about systemic global wealth inequality, which is right next to a calendar reminder to buy oat milk.
It's absurd when you really look at it.
It's so absurd. And our poor primate brains are just sitting there absorbing all of this stimuli, trying to process infinite, massive problems with extremely limited time and, frankly, severely limited agency.
And that is exactly the foundational premise we're exploring today. The mistake we make, the fatal mistake in the modern era, is attempting to respond to all of that incoming importance with equal attention.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that is a huge claim.
Well, we operate under this unspoken assumption that if we treat the entire world as a sacred personal emergency, it somehow makes us more moral or, more engaged.
Look, I'm not panicking. I don't care.
Right. But the reality is the exact opposite. Treating everything as an equal emergency doesn't make you a better person. It creates instant paralysis.
Wow.
It breeds deep, unshakable guilt, it accelerates burnout, and ironically, it results in incredibly shallow effort across the board. Because simply put, if everything is a priority, absolutely nothing is.
I want to stop right there, because I think a lot of people listening just felt a physical weight drop off their shoulders. The idea that treating everything as an emergency is actually counterproductive.
It's a huge relief to hear, isn't it?
It really is. And the material we're looking at today, the source for this deep dive, is essentially a massive, philosophical, yet intensely practical manifesto on how to handle this exact condition.
It's an operating manual for the overwhelmed.
Exactly. Our mission today is to figure out how we, as highly finite, really tired human beings, can actually make decisions when we are surrounded by infinite fires. We want to help you shift from that moral exhaustion to, grounded actual action.
And to get there, to actually shift out of that exhaustion, we have to completely dismantle how we look at the world's problems.
Right, we have to fix our lens first.
Exactly. We have to separate concepts that our panic constantly mashes together. When you are in a state of anxiety, everything feels like one giant ball of doom.
Oh, the doom ball. I know it well.
Right. But the framework suggests we need to break that down into 3 very distinct, cold, analytical concepts. Those are severity, impact, and priority.
Okay, let's pull this apart. Because before I dug into this, if you asked me what my priority should be, I would have just pointed to the most severe problem on the planet.
Which is what most of us do.
Right. I would have said, well, the worst thing happening is automatically the priority. But the text makes it clear those are completely different things. Let's start with severity.
So severity is the easiest one for us to grasp because it's exactly what the news cycle feeds us all day long.
Right, the headlines.
Yeah. Severity asks a very simple, objective question. How bad is this harm if nothing changes? It is simply the sheer scale of the damage.
Okay, so sticking with the example we brought up earlier, climate change.
Perfect example. The severity of unchecked ecological collapse is practically off the charts. I mean, if nothing changes, you are looking at the destruction of global ecosystems, the collapse of agricultural food systems, mass displacement, coastal flooding.
Mass extinction. It's a level 10. It is the highest possible severity.
Precisely. It is a 10 out of 10. But here's a cognitive trap the material points out. Severity alone cannot, and really should not, dictate your personal action.
Wait, really? Why not?
Because a problem can be globally devastating. It can be an absolute catastrophic 10 on the severity scale, and simultaneously be incredibly poorly matched to your personal, individual agency.
Ah, okay, which is where the second concept comes in, impact.
Yes. Impact changes the subject. It moves away from the problem itself, and it looks at you.
It makes it personal.
Exactly. Impact asks, can my specific personal action meaningfully alter this situation? It measures the delta, the difference between you acting and you choosing to just stay home and watch TV.
Right. So global wealth inequality is a severely devastating issue. Huge severity.
Massive.
But as a single individual, unless you are like a head of state or a central bank governor, you have effectively zero direct control over international tax structures.
Or global trade agreements. Your personal impact on that specific massive system is practically zero.
I love this distinction because it forces you to be so honest with yourself.
Okay.
If I redirect that exact same amount of energy away from agonizing over global tax law, and instead I pour it into organizing a local mutual aid fund.
Or fighting for workplace wage transparency in your own office.
Right. Or supporting a local union, my impact skyrockets. The severity of the problem I'm tackling might be smaller, like I'm not fixing global poverty single-handedly, but my impact on those specific lives is massive.
Which brings us to the third piece. The sharp point of the spear, as they call it. Priority.
Priority. The way this is defined in the text is just brilliant. It says, priority is just severity filtered through reality.
Filtered through reality. It's such a grounding concept. A problem only earns the right to become a high personal priority for you when it lands in a very specific, rare sweet spot.
What does that sweet spot look like?
Well, it has to be meaningfully harmful, yes.
Yeah.
But it also has to be somewhat changeable. It must intersect with your actual lived agency and your actual skills.
So things I can actually do something about.
Exactly. It can't already be perfectly handled by someone else. And crucially, and this is the part activists often hate to admit, it cannot be so personally costly that it destroys your ability to keep functioning.
Oh, man. There is a mathematical framework borrowed from the effective altruism movement here that visualizes this perfectly. I want to walk through it because when I first saw this formula, it kind of broke my brain a little bit.
It's a very striking way to look at it.
It says that your priority for any given issue is literally an equation. You take the severity of the problem,
Right.
you multiply it by its tractability, meaning how solvable it actually is.
Right.
Then you multiply that by your personal agency, what you can actually do. Then you multiply that by neglectedness, like, is anyone else even working on this?
Yes.
You take all of that top line and you divide it by the cost to you plus the trade-off risk.
Let's slow down and look at what those multipliers actually mean in the real world because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
The math isn't there for you to literally open a spreadsheet every morning and say, saving the rainforest scores a 42.7, but fixing my local library scores a 43.1.
Right, you're doing literal algebra.
No, it's a thinking tool. Let's look at tractability. If an asteroid is hurtling toward Earth, the severity is total annihilation.
A definite 10.
But if we literally possess no technology to stop it, the tractability is 0. And anything multiplied by 0 is 0. Your priority shouldn't be building a backyard rocket. It should be spending time with your family.
That makes sense. What about neglectedness?
So you might care deeply about a very popular cause. Let's say it's a huge national campaign. But if there are already 10,000 well-funded organizations working on it, your extra $20 or 1 hour of volunteering has a very low marginal impact.
Because it's not neglected.
Exactly. Whereas a completely unsexy, highly neglected local issue like, say, lead pipes in your specific town's school district might have 0 funding and 0 media attention.
Oh, wow. So your personal agency there is a massive multiplier. You showing up actually changes the math.
Precisely.
Okay, but I have to stop you because there is a massive philosophical red flag here that I immediately bumped up against when reading this.
Let's hear it.
When you divide all of this by cost and trade-off risk, doesn't this entire formula just become a hyper-rationalized excuse to ignore massive burning fires so we can, like, go water our houseplants?
That's a very common critique, yes.
I mean, if the world is literally burning, if human rights are being violated on a global scale, and the material looks at all these huge systemic issues, isn't it profoundly selfish to say, well, the math says my agency is low and the cost to my mental health is high, so I'm just going to focus on composting in my backyard?
What's fascinating here is that that reaction you are having is entirely normal. In fact, it is the exact trap of the flat hierarchy of panic we talked about at the beginning.
Oh, really? How so?
We have internalized this bizarre moral compass that says we must hurl ourselves into the absolute biggest, hottest fire, even if we don't have a hose, even if we aren't wearing fireproof gear, and even if we instantly burn to death upon entry.
Wow.
We think the suffering of the attempt is what makes the action moral.
Yes, that is exactly it. It's performative martyrdom. The feeling is, if I'm not suffering as much as the worst suffering in the world, I am somehow complicit.
But let's take your medical analogy from the beginning and expand it.
Yeah.
Let's look at how an actual ER doctor operates during a mass casualty event. You are in triage. A patient comes through the double doors, and they have the most severe catastrophic injury imaginable. But tragically, they are already gone, or they are entirely beyond the scope of modern medicine to fix.
Right.
As the doctor, you do not spend the next 6 hours doing continuous frantic CPR on that one person out of some abstract sense of moral duty to the most severe case, while 20 other people in the waiting room quietly bleed out from entirely fixable lacerations.
Right. You just don't. You don't treat the worst injury just because it is the worst injury. You treat the person whose life your specific hands in this specific facility with your specific tools can actually save right now.
That is exactly the shift the text is advocating for. Choosing to focus on a smaller issue that is highly actionable for you does not mean you are saying that the smaller issue matters more in an abstract, cosmic, universal sense.
The ER doctor isn't saying the person with the laceration is a more valuable human than the person with the catastrophic trauma.
Exactly. They are practicing what the source calls principled pragmatism. It means this specific problem is a better, more effective entry point for your specific life force.
Principled pragmatism. Because without idealism, right, if you just have pragmatism, you're just adapting to a broken world. You're just accepting the garbage, keeping your head down, optimizing your own comfort.
You become callous.
But without pragmatism, idealism is just a recipe for moral exhaustion. You are just standing in an empty field, screaming into the void about injustice until your vocal cords bleed and you burn out entirely.
And a burned-out idealist doesn't help anyone. They just become cynical. Which means, if priority truly requires us to filter the world's problems through our personal agency, the very next thing we have to do is accurately map out where our agency actually lives.
Because most people have no idea where their actual leverage is.
None. We tend to think of the world in two modes, me and everything else. But the framework we are looking at divides our sphere of influence into 4 distinct concentric circles.
I want to spend some real time on these circles of agency because when I mapped my own week onto this, it was deeply embarrassing.
Well, it usually is.
Yeah, it was completely paradigm shifting. Let's walk through these layers for the listener.
So at the absolute dead center, you have circle 1, the self. This is your personal consumption, your daily habits, your physical health, your education, your emotional regulation. This is the foundation.
The absolute core.
Now, what's crucial to understand here is that modern hyper-individualized culture wildly overemphasizes this circle.
Oh, because it's insanely marketable. Like buy this app to optimize your sleep, or drink this green powder to biohack your gut, read this self-help book to cure your anxiety.
Exactly. It turns citizenship into a consumer product.
Yes.
Yes.
We are sold the idea that if we just perfect circle 1, the world magically gets better.
Right. Now, circle 1 is real. You absolutely cannot help others if you are entirely physically and emotionally depleted. But it is literally just the center dot. It is the starting line, not the finish line.
Right, so if you actually have energy to spare, you step out into circle 2, household and relationships.
Yes. This is your immediate family, your close friends, maybe your direct coworkers. This is the dinner table layer.
And what struck me here in the reading is the argument that this is where cultural norms are actually forged. How you talk about race or class or labor or gender roles in front of your kids or how you split chores with your partner, that shapes reality much faster than a generic social media post.
It's the microculture. It's incredibly powerful. But then we step out again into what might be the most vital and paradoxically the most ignored layer. Circle 3, institutions.
This is the missing middle.
It is the massive missing middle. Circle 3 is your workplace. It's your kid's school board. It's your local city council, a labor union, your neighborhood homeowners association, your church.
Places where people actually gather.
Exactly. Individuals very rarely possess the power to change society in a broad, abstract stroke.
Right.
But individuals can absolutely show up to a zoning board meeting and change a policy. You can absolutely organize your department to demand pay transparency. You can change the budget of a local institution.
But instead of doing that, we all just leapfrog right over Circle 3 and we land squarely in Circle 4.
The outer ring.
Yeah, the outer ring. National elections, global capitalism, international geopolitical conflicts, the global energy grid, the climate crisis. This layer is massive. It is slow-moving, and unless you are an incredibly high-level operative, you usually only influence it indirectly, right? Like through voting, donating, or just broad advocacy.
And here is the absolute devastating trap that modern digital life sets for us. It is entirely possible, and frankly, it's very common, to spend 100% of your emotional, mental, and spiritual energy doom scrolling and agonizing about Circle 4.
Screaming about global systemic politics online.
Yes, screaming into the void about Circle 4 while doing absolutely zero durable physical work in Circle 3.
We all do this. I do this. I mean, I have laid in bed, literally vibrating with pure existential anxiety over an international trade dispute or some Supreme Court ruling. But I have completely ignored the emails from my own city council about a local transit initiative that I could literally walk down the street and vote on.
We all know people who can recite the entire historical context of a geopolitical conflict 5,000 miles away, but they do not know the name of the local representative who decides whether their own city builds affordable housing.
It's wild. Why do we do that?
Because it gives us the illusion of engagement without the friction of actual action. Caring about Circle 4 is easy because it rarely asks anything of you other than your outrage.
Wow.
Intervening in Circle 3 is hard because you might actually have to argue with your neighbor or sit in a boring 3-hour municipal meeting on a Tuesday night.
So how do we balance this? Because the answer can't be just stop caring about the world. But we also know we cannot live every single day at maximum moral intensity across all 4 circles. Like if you try to hold the weight of all 4 circles simultaneously, it will literally destroy your nervous system.
This is where the concept of a minimum viable morality system comes into play.
Minimum viable morality.
Yeah.
MVM.
Yes. It's an acknowledgement of our limits. It takes all of those concerns and forces you to categorize them into 4 operational tiers.
Let's build this system for the listener right now. What's Tier 1?
Tier 1 consists of your non-negotiables.
Yeah.
These are the baseline values you absolutely refuse to betray under any circumstances. You don't need to dedicate extra time to them. They are just the rules of your existence.
Like what?
Like, you will not knowingly exploit people. You will not intentionally spread misinformation. If someone is being harmed directly in front of you, physically in your presence, you will intervene.
Okay, so it's the floor. It's the baseline of just being a decent human being.
Yeah, exactly. Then you move up to Tier 2, active commitments. And this is where the rubber meets the road. The rule here is strict. You pick 1 to 3 areas, absolute maximum, where you are actually going to invest real time, tangible skill, or significant money.
Not just tweeting.
Not just tweeting, actual friction-heavy involvement. So maybe your 3 are local housing reform, volunteering at an animal shelter, and serving on the board of a media literacy nonprofit.
Okay. And because you have strictly limited those active commitments to just 3 things, you were forced to relegate dozens of other things you deeply care about into Tier 3. Passive alignment.
Right. Issues you genuinely believe in, but you simply do not have the caloric energy to actively serve right now.
So what do you do with them?
You align with them lightly. You make sure you always vote in favor of them. You might set up a small, recurring monthly donation and just forget about it. You make sure your lifestyle doesn't actively make the problem worse. But you do not carry the emotional burden of solving them. You trust that other people have chosen those issues for their Tier 2 active commitments.
That requires so much trust. Which leaves the final category, Tier 4. And I'm going to warn you, if you are a highly empathetic person listening to this right now, this is the hardest pill to swallow. Tier 4 is release.
Releasing is painful. Because it feels like a betrayal.
It really does. Tier 4 consists of immense, real, tragic problems that you acknowledge are happening, but you are actively choosing not to carry right now. And I struggled with this, I won't lie. It feels like a privilege, like, oh, it must be nice for you to just release the reality of a famine across the globe.
I completely understand that reaction.
So what does this all mean? How do we justify releasing?
The framing here is so important. Releasing a problem is not saying this doesn't matter. It's not saying I don't care. It is looking at the reality of your own finite existence and saying I am not the right instrument for this specific problem right now.
I am not the right instrument.
Think about an orchestra. If every instrument in the orchestra tries to play every single part of the symphony at the exact same time out of some misguided sense of solidarity, you don't get music.
You just get deafening, useless noise.
Exactly. You have to play your part and trust the other sections of the orchestra to play theirs.
And when you finally give yourself permission to release the things you literally cannot change, you free up this massive reservoir of energy. And you can focus your Tier 2 active commitments on what the author calls high-leverage intersections. You want to find actions that don't just solve one isolated thing, but create positive spillovers.
Spillovers are where true systemic change actually happens. Let's look at the example of local housing reform in Circle 3.
Okay, let's walk through the chain.
Let's say you decide your one active commitment is fighting for denser zoning and affordable housing in your specific city. On the surface, you are just solving a housing issue. But if you actually succeed, you trigger a massive chain reaction, a spillover.
Right. If housing supply goes up, rent pressure stabilizes.
And less cost pressure immediately translates to lower rates of localized homelessness. Furthermore, if workers can actually afford to live near where they work, you have instantly shortened commutes.
Oh, and a shorter commute means a direct reduction in carbon emissions without you ever having to join a global climate summit.
Exactly. It also means parents are home an hour earlier every evening, which cascades into improved family stability, better early childhood educational outcomes, and lower localized stress rates.
It's the ultimate multiplier effect.
Yeah.
You pushed on one domino and you knocked over 6 entirely different problems. But, and this is a massive but, the text says we have to be honest about the shadow side of this.
We do.
It's not always clean, beautiful synergies. There is a really stark warning here about hidden trade-offs. Sometimes solving one massive problem directly worsens another, and you have to have the stomach to look at that.
It requires a tremendous amount of intellectual honesty. Take the transition to clean energy. Globally, we desperately need to transition away from fossil fuels to reduce carbon emissions. That is a massive win for planetary health.
Absolutely.
But that clean energy infrastructure, the solar panels, the wind turbines, the massive lithium-ion battery grids requires an astronomical amount of raw minerals.
Right, like copper, lithium, cobalt.
Exactly. And mining those minerals at an accelerated scale can exploit vulnerable workers in developing nations, it can displace indigenous communities, and it can severely damage local ecosystems. So the narrative of green energy is 100% good is a child's understanding of the world.
It's too simple.
The mature, uncomfortable question isn't a binary, is the solution good or bad? The necessary question is, good for whom? Over what time frame, at what scale, and exactly at whose expense?
That requires such a disciplined, narrow focus. You can't ask those questions if you are panicked. There's a beautiful distinction made here between moral attention and practical attention. It says you can have an infinitely broad, deeply compassionate moral attention. You can look at the whole world and wish it well.
Yeah.
But your practical attention, where your hands actually go to work, has to be devastatingly narrow. You might only have room in your life for one civic issue, one donation category, one deep relationship at a time. And accepting that isn't hypocrisy. It isn't failure. It is finitude.
Finitude, the condition of being finite. It's a word modern society is actively running away from.
We hate it.
We do. We want boundless energy, infinite growth, endless capacity. And this actually brings us to a massive pivot point in how we think about all of this. Because we've spent all this time talking about acting locally, narrowing our focus, accepting our limits, but the human mind is restless. It always wants to zoom out.
It inevitably asks, okay, I've fixed my local zoning laws, I've helped my neighbor, but what happens when we take these ideas of impact and priority and we try to apply them to the grand cosmic scale of the universe?
And that is a dangerous game.
Oh man, this is where the reading hits that absolute existential pressure point. Because if you zoom out far enough, the entire project of humanity feels absurd.
Yeah.
You realize Earth is temporary. The sun is a dying star. The galaxy itself will eventually dissipate.
Right. Heat death of the universe.
Yeah. In the grand scheme of all reality across deep time and infinite space, human existence isn't even a chapter. It is a microscopic blink of an eye. So the mind inevitably asks the terrifying late-night question. If absolutely everything is temporary, and if the universe doesn't care, and if, even if I solve this one problem, another one instantly replaces it, what is this all for? Why bother at all?
It's the ultimate crisis of meaning, the futility problem. And to address it, the author does something brilliant. They differentiate 4 mental attributes that our society lazily lumps together under the umbrella of just being smart.
Okay.
They break it into intelligence, knowledge, competence, and wisdom. And understanding the difference between those 4 is the key to surviving that existential dread.
Let's break those 4 down because I thought I knew what they meant until I read this. Let's start with intelligence.
Intelligence is essentially your raw processing power. It's your brain's CPU. It's pattern matching, logical reasoning, the speed at which you can infer a conclusion from raw data.
Okay, that's intelligence.
Yeah.
And knowledge.
Knowledge is your hard drive. It's stored information. Facts, historical dates, contextual references, the rules of a specific domain, you can learn it and store it.
Then you have competence.
Competence is the ability to reliably execute in the physical world. It is the translation of thought into action. It's knowing how to actually do the thing.
So if we use an analogy of, like, building a bridge,
Okay.
intelligence is the engineer calculating the load-bearing physics. Knowledge is knowing the tensile strength of the steel you bought. Competence is the construction crew actually pouring the concrete and riveting the beams so the bridge doesn't fall down.
Exactly. Perfect analogy. But then there's the 4th attribute, which sits above all the rest. Wisdom. Wisdom is judgment. It is knowing whether the bridge should be built in the first place.
Oh, wow.
Does it connect 2 communities that need connecting, or does it bulldoze a neighborhood? Wisdom is knowing what actually matters, knowing when to act, when to wait, and crucially, how to avoid turning your brilliant intelligence into devastating harm.
Because you can be highly intelligent but possess absolutely zero wisdom. We see this all the time.
All the time.
You can be incredibly knowledgeable about, say, the history of social movements,
Right.
but be completely incompetent at actually organizing a simple community meeting in your own town.
Right. And what's fascinating is how the priority of these attributes shifts depending on what scale of reality you are looking at. Let's start at the individual scale. A human life spanning, let's say, 50 to 100 years.
Okay.
At this scale, your priority is largely about learning what helps you live better, managing your own emotions, acquiring knowledge for a career, and not ruining their close relationships.
But then you zoom out. You look at the community scale.
Yeah.
A town, a city, over centuries. And there's a line here that I think every intellectual, every politician, and every tech CEO needs tattooed on their arm. Civilization is not held together by abstract brilliance. It is held together by competent maintainers.
It is such a vital truth. The people who prevent societal collapse are rarely the ones writing brilliant 800-page philosophical treatises. The load-bearing pillars of reality are the person who intimately knows how the municipal water system works and keeps it from freezing in the winter. It's the administrative assistant who knows how to fix the broken scheduling process at the public school so kids actually get to class. It's the community elder who knows exactly how to step into an angry, boiling town hall meeting and de-escalate the tension.
Yes.
Competence and maintenance at the community level are what keep the lights on.
But then
Yes.
you zoom out again to the national and global scales. We're talking billions of people. And this is where the stakes become terrifying. There is a phrase here that gave me absolute chills. The smarter we become, the larger the blast radius of our immaturity.
It perfectly describes the tragedy of intelligence operating without wisdom. Human intelligence, our raw processing power, is staggering. It gave us the agricultural revolution, the eradication of smallpox, the ability to split the atom, and the math required to map the stars.
Incredible things.
But intelligence devoid of wisdom also gave us thermonuclear weapons. It gave us industrialized, mechanized warfare. It built global systems of resource extraction that are literally cooking the biosphere we need to survive.
Yeah.
At the global level, priority cannot just be raw progress. It must be wisdom-guided competence, because our tools are so powerful now that a single mistake scales to the level of billions of lives.
The blast radius is the entire globe.
Have that?
And then we zoom out one final time.
To the universal scale, where all of human history is just a brief chemical anomaly on a wet rock floating in a dark, indifferent vacuum.
The cosmic joke.
Yeah, and the futility problem rears its head again. Because the universe does not morally evaluate suffering. A black hole doesn't care if we achieve world peace or nuke ourselves into oblivion tomorrow.
If you stare too long at the cosmic scale, it will paralyze you. But this is where the framework demands that meaning has to shift. It must shift from a demand for cosmic importance to an acceptance of lived significance.
Live significant. Does the universe care if you sit by the bed of a grieving friend? No, but the grieving friend cares, and you care. The profound argument here is that this lived, localized significance isn't some lesser, pathetic form of meaning. It might actually be the only kind of meaning that has ever truly existed.
There's an analogy used to explain this that absolutely destroyed me in the best possible way. The author says, think of a beautiful piece of music. Think of a song you love. By definition, a song ends. A great meal ends. A deep, lifelong friendship eventually ends.
Right.
But the fact that it ends does not erase its value. The ending is actually what defines the shape of its value. If a song went on forever, it would just become a drone.
It would be unbearable.
Yeah, a gardener doesn't stop pulling weeds just because they know with absolute certainty that new weeds will grow back next month. A parent doesn't refuse to feed a hungry child just because the child is going to be hungry again tomorrow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the essence of wisdom. Intelligence demands a final answer. It views problems as equations to be solved so the test can be handed in and we can finally rest. But wisdom is the learned ability to serve unfinished things.
Wisdom is learning how to serve unfinished things. I need to sit with that. Because our entire modern drive is the exact opposite. We don't want to serve unfinished things. We want to build a machine that finishes all the things for us permanently.
Which lands us squarely in one of the most fascinating dilemmas of our time.
The AI perfection paradox.
Right, because if the universe is just an endless, exhausting conveyor belt of problems, and we are incredibly tired, highly finite beings, the logical technological endpoint is to say, what if we just build an ultimate artificial superintelligence to solve all of it for us?
Let's play this out. Let's do the ultimate hypothetical. Let's say 50 years from now, AI gets so unimaginably smart and capable that it successfully solves world hunger. It models protein folding so perfectly that it cures all known diseases. It optimizes every global supply chain. It completely eliminates human bureaucracy, and it solves the fusion energy crisis. Absolute frictionless utopia. We win, right?
You'd certainly think so. But the psychological paradox identified here is incredibly uncomfortable. Humans constantly claim we want our problem solved, but if every meaningful problem is solved for us by an external entity, humans face total narrative collapse.
Narrative collapse.
We desperately want the dragon slain, but we also desperately want to be the one who mattered in the slaying.
Right. If the AI solves everything, what are we for? If I am no longer needed to ensure my family's survival, if I am no longer needed to fix the broken systems, if my labor is obsolete and my intellect is vastly outmatched, I'm just a pet.
You're a well-fed dog in a cosmic terrarium.
Exactly. As much as we complain about them, problems actually provide humans with our entire architectural structure. Problems give us our roles. The healer, the builder, the teacher, the rebel, the comforter. They give us our identity.
But we have to draw a very hard, very necessary line here, because this line of thinking can easily turn into something monstrous. We cannot romanticize unnecessary suffering just to give ourselves a sense of purpose.
Yes, this is so important.
The text draws a profound distinction between meaningless or excessive harm and meaningful challenge.
A child dying of a preventable waterborne illness is meaningless harm. Working 3 minimum wage jobs and still facing eviction because of predatory housing markets is not some noble character-building arena for human agency. That is just a systemic failure. It's cruelty. We absolutely want AI and technology to eradicate that kind of suffering.
Exactly. We want the baseline of survival secured, but meaningful challenge is different. Meaningful challenge is the friction of learning to play the piano. It's the artistic struggle of writing a novel. It's the intense daily effort of raising a child. It's the exhaustion of running a marathon.
Things we choose.
Yes.
Yeah.
If an AI miraculously solved all survival and security problems, the bottom layers of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we wouldn't instantly transcend into a state of pure bliss. We would instantly be flooded with higher-level existential and meaning problems. We would face overwhelming questions of purpose, autonomy, and identity in a post-scarcity world.
It effectively rewrites humanity's job description. If we're no longer required to be the primary problem solvers of the universe, we have to shift into being primarily meaning makers, stewards, companions to each other, players of infinite games.
Right.
We don't want to preserve starvation just so a human relief worker has a job to go to,
Hmm.
but we desperately need voluntary play and struggle and friction. Because a world without friction is a world without traction. You can't move.
This raises an important question about how we currently relate to the problems we're trying to solve right now. If our goal isn't to frantically finish the universe, how do we engage with it? The framework offers a brilliant contrast here between two mindsets: tragic seriousness and sacred seriousness.
Oh, this distinction is a complete lifesaver. Because I think almost everyone listening operates in tragic seriousness.
I know I have.
Yeah, tragic seriousness is that constant inner voice that says, everything is collapsing, everything is my personal responsibility, every mistake I make is a catastrophic failure, and if I relax for one single second to enjoy my life, I am complicit in the suffering of the world.
And what does that mindset produce? It produces crippling dread, profound guilt, and eventual apathy when you burn out.
Exactly. But sacred seriousness is entirely different. Sacred seriousness says, life is deeply fragile. People matter immensely. My actions have real consequences. Therefore, I will treat this specific moment and this specific problem in front of me with deep care and devotion. But I will not arrogantly pretend that I control the outcome of the entire universe.
Tragic seriousness demands control. Sacred seriousness demands participation.
I wrote this phrase down in my notebook. Take reality seriously, but take your own role lightly. Care deeply, carry lightly.
It's a beautiful mantra. And to actually navigate that shift, to move from tragic to sacred seriousness, to evolve from a frantic problem solver into a grounded meaning maker, we require an operating system. You cannot just vibes your way into this. You need a structured philosophy.
Which is the perfect bridge to testing our operating systems. Because in a world where AI and automation might increasingly handle the mechanical, logistical problems of survival, humans are going to be left entirely with the messy moral, ethical, and philosophical choices. So the natural question you might be asking right now is, okay, is there a winning philosophy? Is there one right way to view all of this?
The author aggressively refuses to treat philosophies like sports teams, where one is objectively undefeated and the others are losers.
Right, it's not a competition.
Instead, they propose a functional test. They ask, does this specific worldview help you see reality more clearly? Does it reduce needless harm to yourself and others? Does it compel you to act meaningfully? And does it help you adapt humbly when you are wrong?
I love that.
If it does those things, it is a useful tool. If it requires you to deny reality, or if it justifies cruelty, it is dangerous.
And they walk through several major philosophies, illustrating that almost every worldview has a healthy version and a deeply toxic shadow version. Let's look at Stoicism, because this is everywhere right now.
Healthy Stoicism is a practice of disciplined peace. It teaches you the vital skill of separating what you can actually control from what you absolutely cannot. In a world of infinite chaos, that is an incredibly powerful grounding tool for managing anxiety.
But the shadow of Stoicism, unhealthy Stoicism, is emotionally armored numbness.
Yeah.
It's what I call tech bro Stoicism. It's using the philosophy not to manage your emotions, but as a shield to avoid having them at all. It's a way to avoid vulnerability, to bypass grief, or to justify being completely disconnected from the pain of others because, well, I can't control it, so I feel nothing.
Exactly. Then you have Buddhism. Healthy Buddhism offers a lens of compassionate clarity. It helps you notice how your own clinging and ego creates suffering for yourself and others. But its shadow is spiritualized disengagement.
The spiritual bypass.
Yeah.
Using concepts like non-attachment or it's all an illusion as a sophisticated excuse to avoid committing to the messy work of social justice or avoiding the hard, friction-heavy work of a long-term relationship.
Right. Then there is humanism, a worldview that centers human dignity, reason, and ethics. The healthy version promotes deep responsibility and human flourishing. But unhealthy humanism mutates into rationalist arrogance. It becomes a worship of human desire and intellect with absolutely zero ecological humility. It's the belief that the earth is just a dead rock for us to extract from.
And beyond the shadows, there are frameworks that the text identifies as fundamentally purely harmful. Frameworks that fail the functional test entirely.
Right, they have no healthy version.
Nihilism, for instance. The belief that literally nothing matters. Even if someone claims to be a cheerful nihilist, the philosophy inevitably leads to either paralyzing apathy or justified cruelty. Because if nothing matters, exploitation isn't wrong. There's also social Darwinism.
Yes, the bastardization of evolutionary theory applied to human society. It uses the harshness of nature as an excuse for systemic brutality. It's a convenient framework for the powerful because it converts systemic exploitation and suffering into deserved failure.
And fanaticism.
Hmm.
The belief that your specific framework is so perfectly divinely correct that normal moral limits no longer apply to you. If your utopia is perfect, any violence required to achieve it is justified.
The diagnostic tool provided here is what they call the shadow test, because every single philosophy, no matter how noble, has a shadow. The goal of life isn't to find a flawless crystalline doctrine that solves everything.
Which doesn't exist anyway.
Exactly. The goal is to understand the shadow of your chosen worldview before it possesses you. You don't need one rigid ideology. You need a layered, flexible framework.
I love how they broke down these layers. Layer 1 is personal grounding. Can this philosophy help me regulate my nervous system and reactions? Layer 2 is moral orientation.
Yeah.
Does this philosophy remind me that other people are real and their suffering matters?
Yes.
Layer 3 is practical action. Does this philosophy equip me to actually fix processes and study the real-world consequences of my actions? And layer 4 is existential humility. Does this philosophy remind me that my life is temporary, my knowledge is incomplete, and ultimate meaning isn't guaranteed?
But there is a massive warning light flashing over this entire process. The text issues a deep caution about what happens when a philosophy transitions from being a tool into becoming an identity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This was my biggest takeaway from this section. When a philosophy stops being a lens you look through and morphs into a suit of armor you wear,
It's a very subtle shift.
it follows a very predictable, dangerous progression. It starts innocently enough. This framework helps me understand reality better. Then as you get deeper into it, it drifts into, this framework represents who I fundamentally am. And finally, it hardens into concrete. Any evidence that contradicts this framework is a personal, violent attack on my very existence and must be destroyed.
That is the exact moment when philosophy degrades into ideology. You stop pursuing truth, and you start merely defending your territory.
And to prevent that hardening, to stay flexible, we have to constantly consume, process, and challenge our own ideas with new information. We are constantly building and rebuilding our worldviews, which leads us to a highly specific, very modern dilemma. How do we actually store and manage all of this knowledge we are furiously taking in without it completely crushing us?
This is a profound challenge for anyone living today. To build these philosophies, to try and be a good, informed steward of reality, we're consuming staggering amounts of information. Podcasts, articles, books, newsletters, documentaries.
It never ends.
And a huge portion of the people listening right now are probably builders of what we call second brains.
Oh, I am so guilty of this. I have a digital library that is bursting at the seams. Notion templates, Obsidian vaults, Apple Notes, thousands of bookmarks, endless folders spanning history, science, philosophy, random world-building ideas for a novel I'll probably never write.
It is incredibly common, but the text draws a brilliant, razor-sharp line between two very different behaviors, knowledge hoarding and knowledge stewardship.
This distinction felt like a personal attack. Let's start with knowledge hoarding.
Knowledge hoarding is fundamentally driven by anxiety and scarcity. It's the voice in your head that says, I need to capture and save this article, this quote, this entire PDF, because I might need it for a project someday, and if I don't save it right now, I'm losing something valuable.
Yep, I know that voice.
It is a fear-based reflex. And what it creates isn't a library. It creates a digital landfill. It creates immense clutter, low-level background guilt, hundreds of open browser tabs, and a perpetual, exhausting sense that you are constantly behind on your own reading list.
Digital landfill.
Yeah.
That is exactly what it feels like. But knowledge stewardship is completely different. Stewardship is driven by care, not fear. It says, I am intentionally preserving and organizing this specific piece of information so that it can serve my deeper understanding, fuel my creativity, or eventually be shared to help someone else.
Exactly.
The physical action is the same, clipping an article into a database.
Yeah.
But it can be hoarding, or it can be stewardship, depending entirely on the spirit and the system behind it.
The diagnostic question to ask yourself is, does your second brain have a metabolism?
A metabolism. Like a body.
Right. A biological brain, a healthy ecosystem, doesn't just statically store things forever, it processes them, it breaks them down. A digital knowledge system needs a cycle. It needs to capture, yes, but then it must synthesize. Then it must create something new from that synthesis. And finally, it must archive or delete.
If you only ever capture, it is just hoarding, it rots. But if you synthesize and create, it becomes culture.
And there's a real physical, ethical dilemma attached to this now, which we rarely think about.
Yeah.
Digital storage isn't just invisible magic happening in a fluffy white cloud.
Well,
The cloud is just someone else's computer. It is massive, humming server farms. Training AI on all this data requires terrifying amounts of power and water for cooling. Our ideas, our little digital notes now have physical supply chains and carbon footprints.
it forces a reckoning.
Yeah.
Are you using these incredibly powerful, resource-heavy digital tools to actually improve clarity, generate beauty, or solve a problem? Or are you just using them to flood the world and your own mind with more synthetic sludge simply because the tool made it frictionless and easy?
Which brings up the paralyzing fear for anyone who makes things. The fear of making trash.
Oh, this is the worst fear.
If you synthesize your notes and you write an essay or record a video or make a piece of art, and it isn't perfectly optimized or doesn't go viral or only 80 people ever see it, is it a waste of those resources? Is it a failure? Did you just add to the sludge?
I love the analogy the author uses to dismantle this fear. They ask you to redefine your output. Is your imperfect, clumsy work trash, meaning it is toxic waste that just pollutes the environment? Or is it compost, meaning it is organic matter that is actively decaying into future fertility?
It changes everything.
A bad first draft isn't toxic waste. A rambling, confused essay is compost. It is the decaying matter that eventually reveals your actual thesis. A failed project isn't a waste of time. It is the fertilizer that teaches you how to build a better system next time. The danger to your creative life isn't making imperfect things. The danger is refusing to metabolize them.
You have to cultivate the habit of asking after every single project, whether it succeeded or failed. What did this teach me? What specific part of this is reusable? And what should be permanently retired?
That metabolic process of reflection is what turns the trash into compost. But this constant churning process of capturing, creating, and discarding brings us to the ultimate bleeding-edge tension for anyone who makes anything in the modern world.
The creator's dilemma.
Specifically, the battle between creative drive and creative compulsion. The source tackles a very modern, hyper-specific scenario that I think is going to define the next decade.
It's a very real anxiety.
Imagine a creator, an artist, or writer who is now empowered by AI and incredible digital tools. They look at their capacity and they ask, if my tools allow me to generate 250 songs or articles or designs a month, but I only choose to make 125, is that a failure? Am I wasting my ultimate potential by not maxing out the machine?
And the response to that anxiety in the text is a resounding, definitive no. The framework completely reframes how we should view output in an era of infinite leverage. It shifts the metric of success away from volume and asks a more dangerous question. Is the act of creation making you more deeply alive, or is it actively consuming your life?
Wow.
Because having too much creation isn't a logistical problem about gigabytes. It's a psychological problem about integration.
Now, I want to frame this for the listener because it hit me so hard. Potential is not an invoice you owe the universe. Just because you can generate 250 songs or work 80 hours a week does not mean you have a moral obligation to do so.
Right.
We have to learn to separate creative drive from creative compulsion.
Let's define the difference, because they feel identical in the body until it's too late.
Okay, let's do it.
Creative drive comes from a place of abundance, it sounds like. I feel energized, I had a surplus of ideas, I'm curious, and I want to explore this. Compulsion, on the other hand, comes entirely from fear and scarcity.
It's driven by panic.
It sounds like. I feel incredibly anxious if I stop. I feel guilty if I produce less than yesterday. I need to keep making things to prove my worth or to stay relevant in the algorithm.
Drive can take a nap. Compulsion has a panic attack when the Wi-Fi goes down. Drive expands your world. Compulsion tightens like a noose around your neck.
The central analogy they use for this is fire. Having an intense, hyper-productive creative drive is exactly like possessing a massive, powerful fire. Fire is a miracle. It can cook your food. It can keep your home warm in the winter. It can forge steel.
Right.
But if it is uncontained, that exact same fire will joyfully burn your entire house to the ground and consume you with it. If you have that relentless drive, the answer is not to extinguish the fire. The answer is to build a hearth.
You have to build the stone structure around the flame to contain it. And in a digital creative life, building a hearth means deliberately creating a system of sorting, resting, listening, and above all, curating.
The author suggests something called the 10% rule as a way to build this hearth. The rule is permission to create endlessly. Let the flood happen. Write the 250 songs. Draft the endless essays. Let the fire burn. But, and this is the structural hearth, You only allow yourself to canonize, publish, or promote the top 10 to 20% of that output. The remaining 80% is entirely for you. It is practice, it is private research, it is joy, and it is compost.
It creates a dam that protects you from drowning in your own abundance. Because here is the profound reality of the era we are stepping into. Content is no longer the scarce resource.
Not at all.
In the age of AI, we have literally infinite content. We will drown in content. The only genuinely scarce resources left are curation, taste, and human judgment.
If you find that you are producing ideas faster than you can meaningfully organize them, if looking at your own backlog of projects gives you a spike of cortisol and anxiety instead of a feeling of excitement, if you never actually finish anything because the dopamine hit of starting a new project is safer than the vulnerability of finishing one,
Then what?
then your creative output has stopped being an asset. It has become a debt. You are no longer managing a task list. You are actively mismanaging your limited life force.
Managing our limited life force. That brings us incredibly all the way back to the very beginning of this deep dive. The entire journey of this material has been about moving from paralysis to agency.
Full circle.
We started with that feeling of waking up to the panic of infinite flattened problems, the x-ray machine broken, the sirens blaring on our phones.
And we walk through how to actually triage those sirens. We learn that severity tells us how bad the fire is, but impact tells us if our specific hose can reach it. Priority is the wisdom to know what actually deserves our attention right now.
We learned to map our agency locally, avoiding the trap of doom-scrolling the global system while our local institutions decay.
We looked at the cosmic scale and accepted that the temporary, blinking nature of human existence is not a reason to surrender to futility, but the exact mechanism that gives our care its shape and meaning.
We looked at the approaching AI paradox, realizing that we don't just want our problems magically solved for us like pets. We require meaningful friction to be human.
We examined our own philosophies, running the shadow test to make sure our worldviews are helping us see clearly, rather than hardening into rigid armor.
And we finally confronted our own digital hoarding, learning to metabolize our knowledge, turn our trash into compost, and build a hearth for our creative fire so it warms us instead of burning our lives to the ground.
The entire trajectory of this framework leads to one profoundly liberating realization. Your job is not to solve reality. You are not the sole protagonist of history, burdened with the task of finishing the universe. Your only job is to participate in it wisely.
Care deeply about the world. Choose your actions carefully. Create your compost intentionally. And carry the weight of it all lightly. Inside this incredibly brief, microscopic human blink of an eye, your raw intelligence has the opportunity to transform into care. And temporary care, localized meaning. It is not nothing.
It might be the only thing that is actually everything.
But I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, unaddressed thread from all of this to mull over as you go about your week. We've talked extensively about filtering. If we are truly moving into an era where we must shift from being problem solvers to meaning makers, and we take this advice to heart, carefully curating our inputs, building our digital hearths, fiercely filtering our outputs, and guarding our philosophies to avoid the shadows. Are we at risk of over-optimizing?
That is the big question.
Are we at risk of curating ourselves entirely out of serendipity? In our desperate quest for the perfect, frictionless, minimum viable morality and the perfectly metabolized, cleanly organized second brain, might we accidentally filter out the messy, chaotic, entirely unpredictable collisions that make us beautifully human in the first place? I want you to think about that the next time you sit down to ruthlessly clear out your digital archive.
And remember, whether it's looking at a crisp, broken arm on an X-ray or feeling the murky, crushing weight of the world on your shoulders, you can only ever treat what is right in front of you.
Until next time.